Well, good afternoon. I want to welcome everyone to Preacher Conversations. This is part of a segment of Somebody Must Come Preaching, which is a book that ministers in Churches of Christ contributed to a couple years ago, right during the pandemic. And today, one of the contributors, Dr. Nicholas Glenn from the Sharpe Road Church of Christ, is with us. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm doing good, Dr. Crusoe. Appreciate the opportunity to come in and share a moment with you on this afternoon.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, man, and I appreciate you. Appreciate the contribution that you're making to our brotherhood and what you're doing in Greensboro, North Carolina. So we're just gonna get started.
All right.
Who is Nicholas Glenn? Tell us about Dr. Nicholas Glenn.
You got time for that? Oh, wow. Originally born and raised in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Um, both my parents are my father is from Winston-Salem. My mother is from a small town not too far from Winston-Salem called East Bend, North Carolina. Been in North Carolina my entire life. My wife and I, we currently live in High Point, North Carolina. And of course, we serve the Sharpe Road Church of Christ, which is located in Greensboro, North Carolina. Got some country roots in me. Love all things country. My grandparents were farmers, so got acclimated to country life at a young age. And my family got introduced to the church actually when my mother was pregnant with me back in 1978. So I grew up around the church and just have really just loved being a part of God's kingdom. Always enthused about the word, even as a young boy. And so that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Well, listen, we follow each other on Facebook, and I look forward to seeing your Sunday afternoon meals. You be throwing down, man.
Well, we do the best we can. We do the best we can.
Yeah, I see some of those dishes you put together. I be thinking I need to jump in the car and take a drive down 85.
Anytime you want, you more than welcome. More than
Yeah.
welcome.
Well, good. Well, so you are the minister of the Sharpe Road Church of Christ. Tell us a little bit about Sharpe Road and how long you've been the minister. And there's a connection. There's a family connection, I think, there. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Yeah, I actually started attending Sharpe Road when we were still on South English Street. I was finishing up my undergraduate degree over at UNC, University of North Carolina at Greensboro, and was a college student there. When I first came to Greensboro, I was actually going back and forth between South English Street and at that time a home congregation, which was the Redland Church of Christ, small church out in Advance, North Carolina. But the more I was at South English Street, the more I liked to be there versus going back to my home congregation in Redland, and kind of gravitated to South English Street. Started off just working with the youth ministry. And from there, I was invited to become a part of the staff back in 2002 as an assistant minister, serving that capacity from 2002 to 2011, I believe. And then my transition from assistant to associate minister. And then I stayed at that position until 2017 when I went from associate minister to the minister there. Worked with my father-in-law, who was the minister there. And when I first came on staff, he was not my father-in-law. I was dating his daughter, and we had just got engaged. And so it just turns that worked out for everybody. It worked out for everybody.
Well, congratulations. Okay, that it worked out. And I'm really impressed because there was a transition in place now. Was that transition intentional, or did it just happen like that? You started a youth minister, and then graduated into associate, then assistant, and then minister. Was that intentional, or it just worked out like that?
I wasn't sure where the Lord was going to lead me. Honestly, I love that church, and just love the people there. And it was my prayer that God would just place me wherever He wanted me to be. I know my father-in-law had a lot of confidence in me, and so did a lot of the leadership at the church. And so just kind of worked out that once he transitioned out, that I was given the opportunity to transition in, and it was a wonderful experience. Getting hands-on training like that was just really invaluable to me in my matriculation as a minister, and of course serving the church there.
Well, I think just more needs to be said about that in our brotherhood, Churches of Christ transition. I've been part of transitions, and there's a negative side, there's a positive side, but I'm happy to hear about the positive side of the transition at the Sharpe Road. I'm sure that people outside of our faith fellowship will watch this, and so when we talk about Sharpe Road and Dr. Nicholas Glenn, members of Churches of Christ, pretty much we know about that. But for the sake of those who are outside of our faith fellowship, who did you succeed? Who was your predecessor? And tell us a little bit about him.
Okay. Yes. My father-in-law, Julius Green, he was the minister there. He actually came there, I believe, in 1995. He came there as the assistant minister. He worked with Dr. Jerry Taylor until Dr. Taylor transitioned to a different locale. And I believe that would have been probably about the year 1999 that he took over. And so he was there from as the minister from, I think, 1999 till he retired in 2017. He still hasn't really retired, although he says he's retired, but he's still up at the building, probably more than I am. And he's still working with us, and been great to have his wisdom there with us. One of the wisest men I've ever met. And just I call them nuggets that he drops to help us to be successful. And we have a great working relationship. And even when he said he was going to retire, he said, it's time for somebody else younger to take it. And I said, no, I'll go ahead and take your time. I'm in no rush. I wasn't in a hurry. I wanted things to happen naturally. And when that time came, he was ready to pass the torch. And but he still works with us and still gives good advice and willing to do anything he can.
Well, I've always said preachers don't really retire. We just die,
Right.
Even when we say we retire, we just find something else to do in church work, that kind of thing. So say hello to Julius for us and everything.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you're from North Carolina. You're married. Any children? You got children?
We have one daughter. She's 11, going on 25.
Yeah,
she's like she's growing overnight. But yes, we have one daughter. She's in 6th grade in middle school and just growing. She's a wonderful young lady, and I don't say that because she's mine, but she is really a jewel. She's a child of God and loves the Lord, and she doesn't like to miss service, don't want to miss Bible class or anything like that. So we don't have to force her to do any of that. She wants to do it. So we're blessed in that realm.
Well, that's great. That's great. That's great to hear. This is a little bit off record, but what is it about North Carolina? Everybody in North Carolina can sing, man. And then in Winston-Salem at Carver Road, I mean, I've never been to North Carolina and didn't hear good singing. What how does that happen?
I don't know. I'm just thankful for it. I'm thankful for it. We certainly are blessed in this area with people who have been gifted in song, and it's just great encouragement to have those type of gifts in the body, and not only just for singing, but most of the people, especially that we see out there, also ministry workers. So they're multi-gifted in that realm. So we're just blessed in that capacity. And I don't know if it's something in the water or something we're eating down here.
Yeah.
But I didn't get much of it, but I enjoy I enjoy being part of the collective whole with it.
Well, you get the benefit of it,
Yeah.
Sunday mornings have got to be just real excited, man. I mean, you guys on fire. I catch some things on Facebook or YouTube, that kind of thing. So I know Sunday morning is always explosive and exciting, and we appreciate what's being done there. Now, let's get back to you, and because these are just preacher conversations. We just two preachers talking. Tell us about your conversion experience. What was your come to Jesus experience like? I mean, how did you come to obey the gospel, become a Christian?
Yeah, as I mentioned, when my parents were actually they got married in 77 and got pregnant. My mother got pregnant with me, and they got baptized in 1978. I believe January 1978. I was born in April of that year, and they just introduced me to the church at a very young age. And back then, preachers would preach, the hellfire, brimstone type messages. And I just love to hear good preaching. I always have. And I can remember being 3 and 4 years old, and I was ready to get baptized. It was clear to me that heaven was real and also hell was real. And I didn't want no parts of hell. So I wanted to be baptized. And so I can remember 4 or 5 years old, asking, I want to be baptized. I understood. But it was, parents said, well, you may be a little too young now. So I waited till I was 7 or 8 years old and was baptized. And that was kind of how I was introduced. But back then they used to bring straight fire. we don't say that. We don't preach like that no more. But back then, yeah.
I can remember, man, the preachers would talk about the Lord returning and separating us like sheep and goats,
Yes, sir. Yes,
sheep
sir.
on the right and the goat on the left, and oh man, yeah, I remember those days and everything.
Yes.
So you were baptized at 7 or 8, and so you were raised in churches of Christ.
Okay? Absolutely, yes, sir.
Okay. All right, well, great. When did you start preaching, and what was your call to preaching like? If we don't normally use that in churches of Christ, but I think if we really take time to examine what happened when we started preaching, there is a certain kind of call, or things happen in our lives, and it's unique to every person. So share with us how you got started preaching and your call to ministry.
Right. My dad was really influential in that realm. As I mentioned, they were new converts when I was born, and their matriculation process and their spiritual growth happened rather rapidly, and they got to where they were growing, and my father actually became a deacon at the church. I believe around 1989. He transitioned, and he's currently now the minister at the church I grew up at, and he's also an elder. But he used to really encourage me to try different things and learn how to do everything. So as a young man, I would learn reading scripture, lead songs, do communion, do the offering, and also was encouraged to teach Bible classes, and also to preach. And the minister, my childhood minister, his name was Magellan Stevenson, and he would always encourage the young men to serve. And he would look at me and say, "You're going to be a preacher one day." And he would give us opportunities to get out in front of the church and to speak and to do things of that nature. And I actually started preaching at age 14. And I say that and I look back at it, I'm 44 now. So it's hard to believe that I've actually been preaching that long. But I started out I was in 9th grade in high school, and started preaching and preached on a Sunday evening, and he would give opportunities for us to do that.
Well, do you remember what your first sermon was?
I do. I do. I don't. It was entitled "Don't Mess with a Skunk,"
Oh,
and
wow.
I got it from read it verbatim from one of those. Oh man, what was it called? Gospel Minutes. I got the idea from. I think it's Gospel Minutes. That was the paper that used to circulate. I'm not sure if that's still in around, but I got the idea from that. Don't mess with a skunk because you will get sprayed. The skunk was the devil.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I was reminded there's a sister that was there that day. She took notes.
yeah,
And
yeah.
every time she sees me, she reminds me, I got notes from your first sermon.
Is that right? Yeah. Don't mess with a skunk, huh?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that was it. That was it.
Well, 30 years later, from that first sermon, and thank God for that first sermon, and thank God for the encouragement that preachers put into your life. Um, what's your sermon preparation like now? And I think back to my first sermon, and I'm just glad people was patient with me, at that. But and then probably before you tell me about sermon prep, I know you recently got your doctor of ministry degree. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll go into sermon prep. Okay.
Yeah, I was fortunate to finish Doctorate of Ministry degree with a concentration in biblical exposition. I finished that in April of 2020, so it was in the pandemic. It was a long road. It was a hard road. I actually started that program in 2010. And so I started off, I was hit the ground running. I was actually ahead of schedule to finish, and then had some setbacks with just life and life experiences. And so I had to table that. And then I got into doing research, and I had to start all over with my research. And when I finally picked it back up, it was difficult. And there were times that I was like, I am going to just not do this. But then I prayed over it, and I thought about it, and I said, I'm going to owe them the same amount of money, whether I finish it or not. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll go finish this. So we were able to get back enrolled, and I was able to finish it up. And it's just been a blessing to me to help in ministry. So I'm glad I was able to do that.
I can relate to the journey, man. I'm telling you, it's the journey is something else, and then you start. I had the similar experience. You get started, have some bumps in the road, and then you get back in the saddle and get it done. Now, where did you do your work at? Your doctor of ministry?
Yep. Well, I started out at Tennessee Temple, and Tennessee Temple was in Chattanooga, Tennessee. They ended up merging with a school, actually with two schools, but I guess the biggest one of the three was at that time Piedmont University, Piedmont International University in Winston-Salem. It used to be Piedmont Bible College. And so they merged there. And then they just recently, after I finished, changed their name again, and it's Carolina University. And so that's a school that I was able to finish up with.
Well, congratulations, man, and appreciate that. Now, sermon prep compared to 30 years ago to now, what is your sermon preparation like?
A lot of prayer, a lot of prayer, because it's just I stand in awe that God would choose to use me in this capacity, and so I don't want to say something that He doesn't want me to say, and so I start with prayer. I gain inspiration from all different sorts of areas. It may be a song that I hear that will spark something. It may be something I'm watching on television or something that I'm reading. I'm always jotting stuff down in my phone, so people think that I'm always on my phone, but it's just ideas and things of that nature that will come. And I may start an idea, and I may not finish that idea until 5 years later. It just depends on what the Spirit leads me to do. But I definitely start with a lot of prayer. in that process and let the Holy Spirit take over from there. But it may be something new that comes that week, or maybe something that I started 10 years ago. And it says, you need to go back and revisit that. And so it's just, I give all glory to God. I say, God, give it to me early, because I don't like wait till the last minute for stuff. But sometimes God just reminds me that, hey, I'm in control. So,
well, yeah. What your approach to preaching? Now they say expository or textual or narrative, topical, exegetical, and then there are just some preachers who are just good down to earth, just good common sense preachers.
Right.
How would you describe your approach to preaching?
Yeah. Since I have a degree in biblical exposition, I would think that I have that aspect, that skill set to preaching, expository preaching, context, guiding the sermon. I love all types of preaching. I love topical preaching. I love narrative preaching. I love just down to earth, good preaching. And so I try to incorporate all of that. I as I mentioned, I grew up in the church, and I was a church kid. And a lot of people don't remember, but we have these little tape recorders. And I would take the tape recorder with me to gospel meetings all over the brotherhood. And my wife gets on me because I have boxes and boxes of sermon tapes dating back to like the 1980s. And so I listen to all these preachers that would come through the area. And so I like to think that I have a little bit of all of that in me. And so I've just been blessed to hear a lot of great preachers and try to pick up on some of those things that I've heard over the years as well.
Yeah. Well, speaking of great preachers, and who are some of the preachers that you've heard, and this could be outside of Church of Christ as well, that kind of stand out? I don't mean like your top 5 or anything, but there are preachers that I can remember certain sermons that they preached, and then there are certain preachers that just really get me excited. I mean, I appreciate good preaching and all preachers, but I think all of us probably have some favorite preachers that kind of stand out. Are there anyone that sort of stands out to you?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. There's just so many. Of course, I have people that really influence me hands-on. My father's a preacher. My father-in-law is a preacher. My uncle, Dr. Kenneth Green, has influenced me quite a bit. Those 3 have definitely had some hands-on experience with me. And again, I mentioned my childhood minister, Magellan Stevenson. I could think back to 2 of the preachers that used to come do gospel meetings for us at the Redland Church that really influenced me. One of them who recently passed was Brother Eddie Brinkley from Wharton, Texas. He was just a master of storytelling. And I can remember stories like almost verbatim from him. And I really appreciate that about him. And the other one I would say from my childhood would be Reginald Doolin. He was just ahead of his time. In a lot of regards, and he was very personable. And a lot of times preachers that came through, they wouldn't talk to little children, but he would talk and, hey man, what's going on? You still shooting hoops? That kind of stuff. And it kind of always resonated with me, being a people person. And
those are 2 great men. And Reggie was just charismatic, and North Carolina is his home too.
Right.
And but Brinkley, I heard of him as well. And I appreciate you sharing that, because one of the objectives of these conversations is sometimes ministers in Churches of Christ, we operate in a vacuum. We know each other, and members in Church of Christ know each other, but outside of our fellowship, we're not as well known. And I'm hoping that this podcast will give ministers in Churches of Christ some greater exposure. So I appreciate you sharing, Brother Brinkley and Brother Reggie Doolin. Are you still playing basketball, or are those days over with now?
I'm trying to get myself in shape enough to play one more time, one more season of ball. My dad, he talks junk. He played with us until he was 50 years old.
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
he talks junk because he played with us for so long and held his own. Him and a few of my friends' dads that used to play with us, and they played. I got one, he's still playing in his 60s.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I don't want to give them that upper hand of talking junk.
Yeah.
So I'm working on that. I'm working on that.
Okay. Well, I remember when I had to retire, man. It was like, it was in Memphis, and we had like a family center at the church, and it was during spring break. College guys came home, and there was this one dude about 300 pounds, man, and I was holding him. He was holding me,
Right.
and he let all his weight on me, and my team just kept winning. We won like 4 or 5 games straight, but I was in the bed for the next week. You know, I said, get up and get out, man. I said,
Yeah.
I was probably in my 40s at that time, you know,
Yeah.
but I had to hang it up. But those days come and everything. Now,
Yes.
yeah.
Indeed.
Let me circle back a little bit. So you started preaching at 14. Excuse me. Did you always want to be a preacher? Is that something you aspired to do? You want to be a preacher when you get grown?
It was something I was interested in. My first passion would probably have been song leading as a child. I love to sing. I still love to sing. I've learned to realize I'm not very good at it. So I started to hone my skills in other areas. But I can probably say in my teenage years, it wasn't too long after I had started preaching that I was like, okay, if God opens a door for me to do this, then it's something I would definitely be willing to do. So it was sometime in my teenage years, sometime maybe 17, 18, somewhere around there.
Well, what was that like, Dr. Glenn, at 14 preaching and your peers? Now, I'm not sure that when I was 14, my peers, well, we had some people that was going to church. That was in school that was church members, but I'm still thinking at 14, what was that like? Was that a lot of pressure, on
It
you?
was different. It was somewhat different. Back then you could, people would tease you, and they call me all the choir boy, church boy names and things of that nature. And, these certain things I couldn't do and couldn't go. But they respected me for it. And ultimately I know that because I have conversations now that we're, in our 40s and they look back and say, hey man, we always knew it was something different about you. And so back then it was a little different, but at the same time, they wouldn't allow me to be in certain places. Nah, man, you can't come here. You don't wear your clothes like that. You don't even sound right talking like that.
Yeah.
But I learned, from years later, some people that I hadn't talked to in years. Hey man, do you mind marrying us, or do you mind counseling us?
Yeah.
And, that people was really watching.
It sounded like they were looking out for you too. They recognized a gift or something special about you and was looking out for you, like, hey, we don't want you to get in trouble, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, what advice would you give to someone now in your 40s and being the senior minister of the Sharpe Road Church of Christ, and a young man, or maybe he doesn't have to be a young man, but someone shares that they're interested in ministry, or they want to get started in ministry, or maybe you recognize someone has a gift. What advice would you give to that person?
Pray about it. Pray about it. Ask for clarity. Ask for direction. Ask for God to plant you where He wants you to be. It's important, I think, to connect with people who can give sound advice from what they have experienced. I found that sound advice has helped me quite a bit, not to make some mistakes. Not say that I hadn't made any mistakes, because I have, but uh, about certain things that people have done and been through that can help you. Those are some of the things that I think are very, very beneficial. And letting God use you, be a vessel for the Lord, and whatever He has, embrace it and take it, and let the Lord do His thing with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. I think prayer. When I first started preaching, I had no idea what ministry was about. I mean, behind the scenes, I knew I wanted to be a preacher, and there's more to it than just preaching from the pulpit. I think we both agree.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the easiest part. Just,
Right.
after you get your sermon together, and delivering is probably the easiest part. But prayer is certainly at the top of the list. I've asked everybody this question, and I think it's an important question that needs to be addressed. You were raised in the church, so all you know is Churches of Christ. But how would you describe the current state of the church? Now, I know that the church belongs to Christ. Christ is the head, and Jesus said the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. We know all of that. But we read through scripture, when Paul wrote to certain churches, that was the state of the church, like the church of Corinth. They had some things going on. Church of Colossae was faced with some things. In your opinion or assessment, that's a better word. In your assessment, how would you describe the current state of?
First thing that comes to my mind is transition. A lot of the pioneers have transitioned. They're no longer here, and so we have younger preachers. Those who were middle-aged preachers when I was growing up, they're now the next level of older preachers. And so I think there's transition there, and transition can be good. It can be bad. It can be difficult because it's unknown, because it's different for everyone. And so you see a shift that's happening, and not all shifts are bad. But I think the main thing should always be the kingdom of God, teaching the gospel, teaching the word, let the word speak for itself. But there's definitely some transition there. And I think some of it has to do with the pandemic. Ministering post-quarantine is definitely different than things that we've done in the past. And so with doing things differently, there's always some uncertainty and a little bit of fear, because it's unknown, and you're trying to navigate things that you've never traveled before. They don't teach you in seminary how to do post-quarantine ministry after a pandemic. But we've seen a lot of different transition, with some of our voices that we've always looked up to, and they've always been there to help guide and give direction. They're no longer here, but I think we have capable and able people who are ready to step up and to fill some of those shoes some of those voids.
Yeah, man, you're right, man. Last year was really a tough year as far as pioneers passing, and then this year started off with some older people passing as well, which is going to happen. But when I got started in ministry, I could always look up to somebody, make a telephone call to somebody, and now those somebodies are not around, and then now and then I get a phone call from somebody. Like I was making the call, now I'm getting the calls.
Yeah, it's different. I used to be big brother. Now I hear somebody calling me Unc. I'm like, who's an uncle?
yeah, that's something. Well, you said something that made me think about another question when you talk about transitions. What positive, constructive things can we do to make that transition from generation? I'm a baby boomer. You're probably a Gen X. Are you a Gen X? Okay. how can the generations transition in a constructive, positive way? There is a generation gap, but we're all on the same team,
Mm-hmm.
and we should have the same goals. I'm searching for advice. I hope this doesn't put you on the spot or anything, but
Right.
I intentionally try to reach out to younger preachers in age, um, um, and I don't know how well I do at that, but I do try to make it. Tim, I appreciate you being part of our book, Somebody Must Come Preaching, and
Mm-hmm.
this podcast. But what can we do, Dr. Glenn, to um, just have a better transition, better rapport, better communication among the generations?
Yeah, I think what you just said is the key is communication, open communication, and that goes a long way. But I think that uh, the relationships need to be formed to where you can have open dialogue and conversations without people being offended or getting defensive. Some of the best conversations that I've had with some of our senior saints, some of those who have had conversations with me, and they tell about South English Street and go back to the 1950s and how the church started and how the church evolved, and getting some of that history of the church has really helped me in having those conversations with those individuals. And their desire is that the church continues to grow. And I think that's the leading force in those conversations, is that we want the church to continue to grow. We want the church to be healthy. We want the church to be vibrant. We want the church to be out in the community doing what God has called us to do. All of us have our own preferences, our own likes, our own dislikes, but to come to common ground for the sake of moving the kingdom forward is such a beautiful thing. And I believe that it can be accomplished. We are blessed to be a multi-generational church where we have, members close to their 90s, and we have, children all the way down, and we've been able to coexist. Everybody is not happy about everything, but it can be done. It can be done, but open, honest dialogue is helpful.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to give that some serious consideration, and hopefully others will do that as well. Well, what's in store for Dr. Glenn in the future, and also for the Sharpe Road? When I say for Dr. Glenn, I remember when I defended my dissertation. They send you out of the room and they
Mm-hmm.
deliberate, then you gotta come back in. And you don't know what they're gonna say. I mean, you hope that you done it well. And one of the persons on the chair said, "Well, they said, are you ready to write a book?" and I'm thinking, man, all this work I've done, I don't want to do anything for a while,
Mm-hmm.
But that was really a clue that I had passed, and
Right.
so I did end up writing some books around my dissertation. What's in store for Dr. Glenn?
I have thought about doing some writing. I actually did a whole lot of research on a different subject matter as part of my doctoral program, and ended up not being able to use that. And so that's real. It was almost complete. As a matter of fact, was one of the reasons I was so discouraged about having to start over with my research. So I may go back and publish some of that. That was on worship. I can't remember the exact title that I had, but it's something around biblical worship. So I may go back and maybe turn that into a book series. But hopefully in the future, one of the things I'm working on is a leadership curriculum for churches looking to install new leaders. And so that's something that hopefully I'll start getting in place this year.
Sounds good. Last question, and I've enjoyed the conversation.
Likewise.
Thank you, sir. If someone is just traveling on 85 going south on a Sunday, what can they expect if they come up to the Sharpe Road Church of Christ? What is it going to be like?
Well, you're going to meet some friendly folk. I can tell you that. One of the first things that I realized when I came to the church as a college student, that people there are just going to love on you, going to greet you warmly, going to make you feel at home. We're going to try to provide a good old Southern hospitality to you. We're definitely excited about coming together on Sunday mornings, and it's evident in our singing and our devotion period. And we try to do the best we can to say an encouraging word. So we hope that someone will come and be edified and encouraged and get a little spiritual fuel to get them through to the next appointed time.
So I know we're going to get good preaching. We're going to get good singing, good hospitality. And then afterward, we're going to get some good food too, right?
We do. And we have a special song that we sing just for our visitors. So
all right.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, Dr. Glenn, is there anything that you would like to say that you didn't get a chance to say, or before we end this conversation?
I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to come and share with you. It's always a blessing to be in your presence. You're actually one of those preachers I remember coming through the Redland Church of Christ as a young guy, and talk about sermons that I remember. You did a youth sermon called "Don't Let the Devil Destroy You," and I remember that sermon very vividly.
Yeah,
I remember that sermon very vividly.
Yeah, that's going way back in time, man.
Yeah, I remember the intro. The intro was right.
Hey, every now and then we hit it like it ought to be hit. You know.
Yes, I remember that one. I remember that one very well. So I wanted to share that with you.
Well, thank you, sir, and give our regards to Julius Green and to your family, and we appreciate what you're doing in the kingdom in Greensboro at the Sharpe Road, and we're just praying that the Lord will continue to bless your ministry. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. Appreciate it, and send our love as well.
All righty. And I want to thank those who are watching this podcast. It will also be available on YouTube. We're going to make it available on the Somebody Must Come Preaching YouTube page. And we appreciate Dr. Nicholas Glenn, the minister of the Sharpe Road Church of Christ, for sharing some valuable insights with us on today. So until next time, may the Lord bless you, and may he bless you real good.